Don't forget that we'll start our Pitbull series on Thursday, August 25th. We have some great guests lined up, some fun giveaways, and we think you'll learn a lot about pit bulls and some amazing animal rescue heroes. Join us on Thursday, August 25th to learn more. Thanks, and on to the show.
This is Paw Print, an animal rescue community, episode 65. I'm Harold Rhee.
And I'm Nancy Rhee. Today's guest is the talented Prue Harrison.
How do you know what affects you? Something does. It can't be the way he looks, because he looks goofy. He's huge. He's 37 kg, so it can't be that he's an easy dog to look after. It's just something in your soul that you can't deny, I think.
Prue lives in Singapore, also known as the Lion City, and she shares some animal rescue stories, talks about the importance of fostering, and shares her personal journey from England to Southeast Asia. If you want to learn more about today's episode, including a photo of Prue Harrison playing Pokemon Go, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/65. That's the number 65.
In my real world, I'm in marketing and branding. In my nicer world, I help animals. So I've done a lot of work with SPCA, the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals here in Singapore. We've got a whole bunch of what we call animal welfare groups that have now sprung up. Some are registered charities, some are just people doing it because they love animals. But most have come together with a huge need because as Singapore's grown and basically there's no more jungle or green spaces, it's all buildings. Obviously the animals have nowhere to go anymore. So we've all sort of come together and tried to help the animals that get into distress and that need somewhere to go.
If someone were to visit Singapore for the first time, I mean, is it truly a completely urban place to visit? Is there some green space? I mean, how would you describe it?
Yeah, there's two kinds of green space. There's the manufactured green space that is created once a housing block is built. They always build green space around it or within it. And then there's the sort of, I call it jungle, but it isn't really jungle anymore, but sort of the unkept bits of land that haven't yet been invaded. So those are like the real green bits where you'll find the stray animals, where sometimes you can't even get into. It's like, very, very dense jungle still. And then obviously the bits of park around the beaches that is still open, where you don't find any animals, except of the two-legged variety.
Yeah. I mean, the people who I know who have lived in Singapore or who live in Singapore absolutely love it. Can you maybe describe to folks what makes Singapore special?
I guess the living is easy. I mean, everything works amazingly well. It's not very big, so you can get everywhere. If you want, a widget for a motorbike you're building, let's say, the max you'd have to drive is probably 45 minutes to find it if it's on the other end of the island. So everything's very accessible. There's everything you ever wanted. There's every kind of food from around the world you ever wanted. Education is amazing for children. It's very safe. It's just, so easy to live here. And then any kind of entertainment you want is available. There's amazing clubs. You can easily get to islands. You can easily get to Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand. It's just a very easy place to live and to entertain yourself.
Sounds great. Now, How about for stray animals, though? I mean, is it a tough life? Is it a harsh life? I mean, how would you describe it for someone who is involved more in animal rescue?
Yeah, getting tougher, I suppose, because they've got fewer and fewer places to live. The more we encroach into the jungle to build high-rises, the less place they have to hide out and live. So, and of course, Singapore being this clean and green city, the government won't allow strays to just roam the streets. So they have to hide. So the fewer places there are for them to hide, the less chance they have of actually remaining hidden and the more chance they have of getting caught and getting killed, right. which is why the animal welfare groups come into play, I guess. So, I mean, it's a tough life for a stray. You've got extreme heat, you've got extreme rain. The humidity is horrible for the dogs. It's ticks and fleas galore. There's snakes that eat them. There's wild boar that eat them. It's not an easy life for a stray. And then that's like the real strays. They're a bit more savvy, obviously, but now there are a lot of people in the last 10 years that have decided they like animals, but they don't really like the hassle that goes along with them or the commitment. So after It depends, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, they get sick, they get old, the neighbor says they bark too much, they tend to just abandon them. So those become strays, but they really have no clue how to live as a stray. So it's even tougher for them.
You first started out saying you're in a tough business to be in. What exactly makes your business so tough? And in comparison, why is animal rescue an easier kind of way of life for you?
I wouldn't say easier, because you need soul food and you need logic food. So my daytime job feeds my need for being like busy and frantic and hectic and efficient person, whereas my animal rescue job is it feeds the soul. Like, you feel blessed to be able to help them. You feel that you've done a good job when you can like take in a dog that needs help, foster it, and then be able to get it adopted as a result of that, and then have room to take in another one, and on the cycle goes. So it's sort of two different parts of the psyche that need attention.
Well, why don't you just start from the beginning? What was the first animal who really made an impact on you, whether it was animal rescue or your own animal?
Ooh, you do ask hard questions. I guess as a kid, we always had animals growing up, dogs, cats, horses even. So then when I moved to Singapore, and I guess as a 20-year-old something, career takes over, you don't have time or the heart at that time to take in an animal. So I lived for 10 years maybe, animal-less. And during that time, I just couldn't be animal-less. So that's when I started working with the SPCA, really, so I could play with the animals. It was a selfish desire at the beginning. It's just there was a ready-made pool of cats and dogs to go play with. And obviously, the more I worked with them, the more I got involved with them. It wasn't just a need to play. It then turned into they need help with counseling. They needed help with people who walk in to understand what it takes to look after a pet. It's a lifetime commitment, that they get sick, that, you don't just, it's not a soft toy. It's a living, breathing thing with a heart that you've got to look after properly. So, at the beginning, Singaporeans just didn't really understand the involvement. So what we found at the SPCA is they would adopt a pet and return it, a year later or less sometimes, just because they hadn't realized the involvement. So what we needed to do then was really spend a lot of time with the humans, teaching them what to expect from an animal. So that sort of got me working with animals in a very different way. I worked with them for 15 years voluntarily, which was awfully long time. And then after that, I got involved with these welfare groups, because more and more people then realized that animals, they need help. But there weren't really the groups that were out there that could do the rescuing, the fostering, and then the rehoming. There was only the SPCA at that time. So I left SPCA with all the knowledge I sort of learned from them, and then helped some of these animal welfare groups figure out how to go about helping the animals. Because what was happening was they were just feeding groups. So they would go out and feed the strays. And then that kind of got the strays into trouble, because they sort of started to trust humans after that, and then were easy prey for the government catching them and killing them. So there had to be a way for the feeders to then recognize the difference between those that really needed help. So if they were injured, or if they were pregnant and had nowhere to put their babies, if they eventually could get friendly with them and sterilize them and then leave them where they were. So all the different parameters that there are in sort of getting involved with strays. And really, we just sort of took it upon ourselves to start these groups and figure out how to do it. So now we've got different groups all over the island doing different jobs. Some just do the feeding and sterilizing, others do the rescue, others do the fostering, others do the rehoming, and then there's the sort of aftercare that comes along with that. So that's a huge industry already.
It's an awful lot of work and a lot of different roles you have to play. It sounds like in general it's pretty high kill policy, right? If they capture, they eventually kill. Has that changed over time? Is there room for the government to change, in your opinion?
It has changed. They have sort of listened and tried to make a difference. There's two huge problems. One is it's actually illegal, first of all. Well, no, start from the beginning. In Singapore, 80% of our housing is I don't know what you call it in America, but council housing equivalent. So the housing board development, so subsidized housing.
Okay. Yeah, subsidized,
and all of that, right. So all of that, you're not allowed to keep a cat, period.
Oh, wow.
And previously, you were only allowed to keep a dog that was no taller than 53 centimeters or something. So that was a huge problem because, I mean, I don't know what strays are like around the world, but the strays here all come big. There's nothing smaller than 1 foot, I wouldn't have thought. They're all classic mongrel size. So that was a problem. You've only got 20% therefore of homes that would even be allowed to take that size dog in. For years and years, that was a huge problem, and cats people took in just because nobody would really notice if you had a cat. But if the council saw, they would just take the cat away. So both sort of rehoming cat strays and rehoming dog strays was a huge problem just from where do you put them.
Sounds like there really is no place, right?
Yeah, so a lot of shelters sprung up. Some shelters can house up to 100 dogs and 300 cats at a time, but then you have the dilemma, are you really rescuing it? Are you imprisoning it? Would it have been better off that you didn't even know it was there kind of thing? It becomes a chicken and an egg, right?
Sure.
Do you go around looking for these strays and then put them in a prison for the rest of their lives, or do you turn a blind eye to it? So that's why we try to only really rescue those who need it and then just feed, sterilize, and put back the ones who don't. But again, that's a problem because the more building goes on, the less places there are for us to put them back. It's an evil circle. But the government has listened, and they've got what they call this Project Adore. And I can't for the life of me remember what ADORE stands for, but it's basically to allow a bigger than 53 cm dog into a subsidized flat.
Yeah.
So now you can get strays in there as long as they're the sort of small build strays, which has helped hugely. And I think they're also changing now that it used to be up to 3 dogs in a private home. And now I think you're allowed 4, as long as the 4th one is a stray.
Yeah, great.
Which is great. I mean, to have that change is just huge. Government generally don't really look into animal welfare, so for them to have done that change it's really a great step in the right direction.
On average, how many dogs and cats can the animal welfare groups that you work with, how many can they usually take?
Again, it depends on how big their premises are or how many fosterers they have in their network.
Sure.
A huge part of it is trying to have enough fosterers, because when you bring an animal in from the wild, first of all, you've got to do all the medical treatment. A lot of them have tick fever. Some of them have heartworm. Some of them are injured in some way. So you need fosterers that can nurse them back to health first of all, or if they're puppies, wean them and train them and get them to an age where they could be adopted. The fosterers need to humanize them. Some of them are just very, very scared, so they've got to learn how to live with humans. Obviously got to be pee and poo trained and all that boring sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I would say that the pee and poo training is, while it's boring, it's also the most memorable.
Well, yeah, especially if you've done it, yes.
Right, exactly.
The amount of times you've come down from the bedroom and trod in something you didn't really want to tread in.
Sure,
6 in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. In general, in the United States, I don't want to generalize too much, but with the larger or medium size, you see what we call here in the United States more pit bull mixes.
Right.
In Singapore, what do you tend to notice?
The mongrels we get, I don't know how to describe them. I mean, they're a mix of everything. There was a time when the dog breeders, there are still quite a few illegal puppy farms here. So what the dog breeders would do would be take their Labrador, Boxer, Terrier, or, whatever it was, Bulldog, take them out to the jungle, leave them there for a bit, let them impregnate the female, because there was some myth that the first sperm of the dog is not good enough, and then they'd bring the male back and then have him, do the breeding cycle. So really, our mongrels are a mix of. Actually, we could call them crossbreeds.
Right.
They don't even need to be called mongrels. You can really see in some of them that they're exactly a boxer cross or a poodle cross or a retriever cross.
Yeah.
It's quite clear. But most of them end up sort of a chestnut brown color. Brown and white is quite popular. Black and white is popular. The pure black never get adopted. I don't know what it is with people and black dogs. Black beauties don't seem to be black beauties. It's always a problem trying to get a.
I think that's a problem worldwide.
Really?
I think there are statistics that show black dogs in general get adopted at a far lower rate.
Sad, huh?
Yeah, it's
Strange.
true. Yeah. Now, you mentioned puppy mills. I mean, obviously Singapore being more urban, where do these puppy mills actually? Where are they located usually?
Yeah, well, they're in those areas that are still almost jungle, but they've got sort of container huts set up, and they puppy mill out of those places.
Right. I mean, is there any
there
kind
are-
of legislation that makes them illegal, or not necessarily?
No, but there's no legislation that makes them legal either. And a lot of the time, what they do is pretend that they've brought these puppies in from Australia or New Zealand or England or America or wherever, when actually they've been, raising them out in the jungle somewhere, so they can get more money for them that way. But what will happen then is the breeding dogs, obviously at some point become useless, and then they just get abandoned. So again, a lot of the animal welfare groups end up picking up ex-breeding dogs, which are in a hell of a mess. There's 2 animal welfare groups just dedicated to the dumped breeding dogs.
Oh no, yeah.
And those animals are just pitiful to see.
Yeah.
But they've kind of got a whole separate group of adopters that just have that heart to look after a wreck of an animal.
Yeah.
And it mostly happens to dogs. I don't think we've got cat breeding farms, luckily.
We're talking to Prue Harrison, who lives in Singapore and has been involved in animal rescue for many, many years. Prue, maybe tell us, before Singapore, where did you live and what was your journey to Singapore?
Totally un-animal related. So I was living in England and working in London, and I met a guy in a pub who said, had I heard of Singapore, did I want to work there? And I'm like, where? No. He goes, well, it's over in the Far East. I'm like, oh, right, yeah, cool. And didn't believe him at all, thought he was on magic mushrooms, so just took his card and ignored him. And then my husband came home about 3 months later and said, hey, I've been offered a job in Singapore. Have you ever heard of it? And I'm like, huh? So serendipity, I guess, sent us both over here. We thought, why not? Let's try it. Neither of us had even been further than Europe, I guess. And we both came out here to the Far East. Turned out better for me. I'm still here 32 years later. He left after about 5 years.
Oh.
So yeah, it was work really brought me out here. And I did meet the guy, and he was serious. Back then in my business, which is advertising, marketing, branding, they needed Westerners to sort of teach them how to do it, kind of thing. They didn't really have the experience or the history or the practical knowledge that the clients needed. There was a good market to jump into then.
Yeah.
At one time, I think you found something like 200 multinational agencies and local agencies, fighting for 5 million people's attention. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Sure.
The number of practitioners far outweighed the number of people we were talking to. It was just crazy. But that was because so many multinationals set up here, and they needed the partners to work with for their marketing needs.
How many years of living in Singapore before your friends in the UK kind of gave up on you for moving back?
Interesting. 5 probably.
Yeah.
After 5, they all kind of lost interest.
After how many years did you really kind of feel like, hey, I'm a Singaporean? Or
I don't.
Oh, okay.
I know, really. 32 years later, and I still don't think I'm home. I mean, how crazy is that? Obviously, I've now lived here longer than I even lived in England, but yeah, it still doesn't feel like home, and I still think I want to go back one day, which is ridiculous. How can you after this long here? So yeah, strange. It's strange. Maybe you can feel like 2 places at home. I'm not sure.
Sure. If you do, how often do you go back to Europe?
Not very often. Maybe once in 5 years.
It's not an easy flight. Yeah.
No, it's not an easy flight, and when you get there, it's just so expensive. I mean, everything here is apart from cars, which everybody's heard about, and houses, everything else is really cheap. You can eat for, $2, whereas if I go to England to see my relatives, $2 doesn't even buy me a packet of crisps. But now, strangely, my daughter, my children are both Singaporean. Obviously, the second time round, I married a Singaporean.
Sure.
So my children are both Singaporean, but my daughter has now chosen to go to university in England.
Oh.
So it's kind of weird. Like, she's a foreigner in England, and yet I feel like it's sort of like, wait a minute, you're at home. Why am I here and you're there?
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. But maybe now that she's there, that'll give me an excuse to go over more often.
Can you think of any specific animals who made an impression on you?
I guess my first foster fail.
Tell us about it. Yeah, tell us about it.
He was rescued from a farm, actually not far away from my house, coincidentally. And one of the ladies who I'd kind of met said, would I be prepared to foster this dog? And I'm like, yeah, sure. He wasn't the first foster I'd done, but the way she was asking me, I kind of thought it was going to be a challenge. So when she brought this dog, he was about 4 or 5 months old. Apparently what had happened is he'd been injured by a truck at the container park they were living in. And all the other litter mates would sit on him at feeding time so that he didn't get to eat because he was the weakest. And they had to kill him off, basically. It's survival, right? So they rescued him out of there. So he was malnourished. He had all kinds of nasty skin conditions and stuff. Basically, he was a dying dog. Obviously, the truck injury, although there were no physical wounds, it's an internal wound. He's basically like a permanently dancing dog. He's got this twitch from the back left over to the front right. So he always looks like he's dancing, he's continually in motion. So it's like it was hit and miss whether he'd live or not, but he has. We then tried to get him adopted. Obviously, you go through, adoption fair after adoption fair. And at one adoption fair, one of the animal welfare groups came to me and said, "Can you take your dog away? All the other dogs hate him." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And I realized how much I'd become attached to him at that point, because normally you just see them as a whack job and just walk away. But it kind of got to me, and I thought, uh-oh, this is going to be the dog I keep. And sure enough, he was, the first one I adopted.
Wow.
And my first foster fail. But yeah, I think probably in Singapore, he's the one who's made the most impact on me.
and what's his name?
Kaizen.
Okay.
It's Japanese, Kaizen. I don't know if you're familiar with there was something that General Motors and some other clever marketing people came up with that was sort of the way to produce change.
Right.
And there were 6 pillars, and one of the pillars is change for the better, and the word for that was Kaizen.
Right.
So I named him Kaizen, hoping he would change for the better, and he sure did.
That's great. And hopefully he changed you a little bit too, right?
Well, yeah, he certainly got me way more involved with all the dog groups now. You meet a whole bunch of people that you would never otherwise have met. Obviously, you get exercise. You get to stay up at night when he's sick, all those usual things.
What makes Kaizen special for you?
I don't know. I mean, how do you, it's the same when you find a lover, right? How do you know what affects you? Something does. Something just talks to you deep in your heart that you can't ignore. And it can't be the way he looks, because he looks goofy. He's huge. He's 37 kg, so it can't be that he's an easy dog to look after. It's just something in your soul that you can't deny, I think.
Any other animals who made an impact on you?
I think probably in my childhood, we had a horse who magpie ate one of her eyes, and we had to have it taken out.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. So she had this empty socket in her eye. And the dog that we had at the time, he was a Dalmatian. He decided once that happened that he would stand by her side, day in, day out. So whenever she walked from paddock to stable or stable to paddock, he would escort her. I mean, she didn't need help. She was perfect on her own, but he just decided that he would do this job, that it was, his job to make sure she didn't bump into anything or, fall into a hole. So the two of them together, I guess, just made a huge impact on me.
Wow, a horse and a Dalmatian together. How old were you when you saw this, when you witnessed this?
I guess I would have been 14. Yeah.
Why did it make such an impression on you?
I probably hadn't realized that inter-animal species react so well together at that time. That they would just, I didn't realize they would help each other. Dogs live in the house, horses live out in the field. Who would have known that they would just find each other and help each other? I didn't realize that happened before.
If someone were to ask you, why should I rescue an animal? What's the importance of rescuing an animal? What would you say?
I would say you shouldn't if you ask me that question. Because that means you don't have the heart for it. But if you're an animal lover and you say, how can I help the animals? Then I would say, the first need is really fosterers. Fosterers is the missing link. They're so important if we're doing any kind of rescue and then rehoming work. You can't take it straight out of the jungle and put it into a house and expect it to work. So, I would say you need to be a fosterer is the most important. Right. And then, why should you do it? Because the animals can't fend for themselves in a ever-developing country like Singapore. They need help. Nobody else is going to help them. We have to help them. They can't help themselves at some point.
Right.
We have to do it. Let's not be selfish. Let's give some of our heart and energy and time and money to the animals.
What does it take to be a good foster in Singapore?
Patience and money, probably. Mm-hmm. Money, obviously, anyone who keeps a pet, you got to have money because you got to feed it and to bring it to the vet. But when it's a foster, it's sort of not yours. When it's yours, you don't mind paying. So it's like you're paying money for something is going to go on to someone else. So that's quite hard for some people to do that.
Sure.
Patience, because you get this weird creature. I mean, they all have such strange quirks when they come to you. Either they're the sick ones that need medical treatment, or they're the scared ones that need bringing out of their shell, or they're the ones that have had some kind of abuse that you've got to help them overcome, being afraid of being hit, or being afraid of shouted at, or being afraid of loud noises, being afraid of thunder. You've got to sort of help them overcome that. So yeah, you've got to be really patient sort of person to do the fostering. And then the kind of person that can put up with the pain of letting it go after a month, 2 months, 3 months, because we form attachments to the foster animals, clearly. But you've got to, see that it's going to go to a permanent home after that, and that you can let it go to that home, because if you don't, there's going to be another animal that needs rescuing that won't have a place to be fostered before it can get adopted. So you'll close the chain if you keep it after that time.
Well said. Thank you, Prue. And obviously, letting go might be the toughest part because of the emotional aspect of it. Right?
It is. I mean, that I spend a lot of time talking to people about that, because when I say, hey, you want an animal but you don't want the commitment, you're a perfect foster person, and then they go, yeah, but what if I love it too much? And I'm like, well, yeah. So I do spend a lot of time talking to people about that. I mean, the obvious answer is, hey, what if you fall in love with it? Keep it. I'll find another fosterer. But obviously, really it is helping them see that once you've brought it to a point where it can be adopted, getting it adopted is the best thing, because then there's another one that can come into your house and you're helping 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 more, whereas, otherwise you wouldn't have even helped one. Just how much room in your heart do you have for it to get a little bit broken? Right. And then there are ways that we can help you. We sort of, depending on what kind of person you are, if you're a completely soppy, sentimental person, we sort of recommend that you don't even visit your previous foster dog for like a month, 2 months, 3 months, or ever. Just let it completely go out of your life. If you're a bit stronger, then visit it after 1 or 2 months, because it's not good for the animal either. They've got to learn that you're not coming back for them as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, they need to make a new bond, right, with the new family. So.
But somehow they know it. I mean, I think a lot of the foster fails happen because it is the right match for you, whereas the animal will know if it's not going to be yours that they're just temporary. They kind of know that, and they know, okay, I've got to be good here and learn here because there's something better waiting for me. And somehow they know that. Right. You could sort of tell they see it as a temporary lodging, which is interesting. Animals know and feel a lot more than we credit them for, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Tell us a little bit about the animals in your the menagerie in your place. And it sounds like in this case you are living in housing that does allow for more animals.
I am. Yeah, I bought a house, 22 years ago, deliberately in the middle of nowhere so that I could have like a bit of land. So I've got a bit of garden front, back, and side. So, and it's private, so I'm allowed to keep 3 dogs. But actually, at the beginning, I just started keeping cats, and they were all rescue cats as well. Like, we just found them in the street, or people would dump them in our gate, or other cats would bring in other cats. I mean, that's ridiculous. It sounds stupid, but it really happened so many times. One of our cats would go missing for a couple of days. A cat that needed help walking in the door with it. So at one time, I had 13 cats, which was just insane.
13 cats?
Yeah. But now I've only got 3 survivors, 2 dogs.
Really just the last question, which is if you were to wave that magic wand and fix something about the environment for animals, what do you think you would change?
That's easy. Allow cats and bigger dogs into a HDB apartment. Because many people want to adopt them, and it's just illegal.
Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like more of a legislative issue in some ways.
Yeah.
What do you think it would take to change that?
I guess what it's taken to get it, the changes that have happened so far, which is just constant chipping away at the MPs, at the government, at any forum we get, any adoption drives we have. We put up big posters and sort of say, wouldn't it be so much easier if you could put this into your apartment? Help us. Tell the government to change their rule, just chipping away at it again and again and again.
We want to say thank you to Prue Harrison for sharing her story and for doing a wonderful job with the animals of Singapore. And we want to thank Stephen Shalowitz, host of the One Way Ticket Show podcast, for connecting us with Prue. If you want to learn more about today's episode, including a photo of Prue as a child, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/65. If you'd like to nominate someone to be a future guest on Paw Print, you can go to our contact page at thisispawprint.com/contact. If you'd like to listen to more episodes of Paw Print, you can find us on your favorite podcast app like iTunes, SoundCloud, Pocket Casts, and YouTube. Make sure to hit subscribe to get the latest episodes immediately. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Look for This Is Paw Print, all one word. As Nancy mentioned, don't forget that our Pitbull series begins on Thursday, August 25th. Thanks to all of you, our listeners out there, for sharing Paw Print with your friends and family. And remember that you share a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time on Paw Print.
Paw Print is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.